If at all possible, can we stop riding on top of suspect vehicles? Think of a vehicle as a weapon that's capable of turning within a given radius and running you over. A radius that you should be relatively familiar with because you've been driving your entire adult life. Problem is that we get comfortable with compliance where we set unrealistic expectations and also lack the ability to think critically. You shouldn't be intentionally placing yourself in front of a moving vehicle. Not only because you could get run over, but because there could be legal issues with the fact that you created the danger that caused you to discharge your weapon. Like this officer who got fired for doing just that. But then he got his job back and had to quit because the department was making his job intolerable, and the family settled out of court with the city over an undisclosed amount of money. Right, wrong, or whatever your opinion is, all that stuff you don't want to go through. Don't be anywhere the suspect vehicle could turn into you. I understand that sometimes you have to be where you are, and where you are might currently suck. But are you there because you made decisions based on what you thought your authoritative presence would achieve? When you approach a suspect vehicle who's already demonstrated the willingness to resist or not comply, what's your plan exactly? You probably don't have one. I'm certain when you do this, you don't plan on this or this happening. I'm sure you didn't plan on staring at a door you couldn't get into, getting shot at, run over, or dragged by the vehicle, which hopefully after this video is all of the things that you should start accounting for. When we get close to vehicles and we point our guns at people, there's this "I have this locked down" or "once I gain ground, I don't like to give it up" mentality. There's a good chance you don't have what you think you have, and you probably can't do what you think you can do. Well, I guess you can if none of the stuff I mentioned happens, or one way or another the bad guy is taken into custody. Look at this video and tell me if you see a gun. In case you couldn't tell, he doesn't have one. But if he did, that would have been him shooting first. And whether or not you would have been available to respond would depend on whether or not you're in the street already telling dispatch that you've been shot. You have zero control over the suspect's actions. That means that you should be preparing yourself for something that's unpredictable, which is pretty hard to do. It's even harder when you're within arm's reach and making yourself fully available to be shot. If it works out, and it often does, that's because they either weren't armed or they didn't want to actually shoot you, run you over, or take you for a ride along. And you couldn't possibly know any of that beforehand. If you think this content is valuable, you should send it to your buddies to get a second opinion, and help me help you by feeding the algorithm down below. In today's law enforcement climate, do you really want to be in a position to be shooting somebody who's digging around in a car? The only way you shoot someone who actually isn't armed in that scenario is if you willingly put yourself in a position to do so by locking it down and not giving up ground or whatever. Like this officer who was charged with murder for doing just that. Let's pretend you're, I don't know, 5 feet away pointing your gun at me as I'm sitting in my car because I'm being a dickhead, and the situation probably warrants you pointing your gun at me. Also pretend you are planning on acting appropriately. When do you think you should or should not shoot? If I ran this drill with officers, I'm confident the officers would guess wrong and shoot a no-shoot, or they would only engage after already being shot at. And that means that you could be dead already. This is what everyone thinks they'll do when someone is shooting at them. And this is what actually happens, which leads to less accountability and just doing whatever and making something up. The best case scenario is that the vehicle is contained and the suspect surrenders. The second best case scenario is that officers formulate a plan to breach and extract the suspect while approaching the vehicle with a shield. I realize that's asking for a lot, so let's just start with put as much of the vehicle between you and the suspect as possible, establish a position of domination, maybe create angles, set a perimeter, and start communicating with the suspect. I'm confident most department policies at a minimum forbid you to rush a vehicle during a critical incident. If everything goes fine, maybe they won't care or they might not even know about it. But as soon as you do any of the stuff these other cops did, they're going to distance themselves from you as they point to the policy violations. And when they won't cover your medical bills and you can't work the rest of your life, that's going to be another kind of hell. People often comment asking me how this channel hasn't blown up. I have no idea, but I think if you subscribe and leave a comment, that would probably help.